Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. Now, we're getting into the Christmas spirit of things, so we're going to go over a few things that are going to help you get and look after the plants that you're going to be seeing available for Christmas. We shouldn't take them for granted, but also we want them to last. And sometimes at this time of year, we get plants that are, how shall I say, a little harder to look after. So let's start with the azaleas, which are really actually rhododendrons. Now, these are what's known as a florist or an interior or a semi-evergreen or an evergreen rhododendron with small leaves. And of course, they've been budded, and usually this means that they've been chilled or they may have been treated to a cold condition so that the buds will develop, and at the same time they will bloom even at this time of year. Now, if you are going to be doing this when you have an existing azalea or rhododendron of this type, you always keep them outdoors with frost protection for as long as possible. This usually means about now. And what will happen is the buds will develop, they'll swell, and they'll get ready for Christmas. Now, you can't just go and throw these into a warm house. The flowers will blast and not last. So they're going to have to go into a very cool, bright location as a transition. So you've had these plants all summer. You've been growing them probably in semi-shade underneath another tree or a gazebo or a shade house. And the natural cold has actually done your work for you. Instead of using a cooler to chill them, you're letting Mother Nature do it. So these guys are going to need a cool, bright location in your home. They're one of the harder ones to look after, this and gardenias as a houseplant. So when you consider buying one of either of those, even if it's at this time of year, please don't give them as a gift to a non-gardener who is what I would call accomplished. They are harder to look after. So what are you looking at? You're looking at 60 to 65 during the day, and you need to be down around 55 at the most, and that's in Fahrenheit, at night. And it has to be like that every day while they're in the house. You must keep them moist. They can never sit in water, but the soil must always be moist, and they have to have a decent, well-lit conditions with reasonable humidity. Now, in our house in the wintertime, what have we got? Hot, as dry as the Sahara Desert. So, because most of these azaleas have a slightly hairy leaf and dentum, you don't want to miss them. So that means a humidity tray of gravel underneath the pot, water in there, let it evaporate. You, of course, never miss the flowers. So, there you go. That's what you need if you're going to try and grow azaleas or rhododendrons indoors. And these are the florist type. With Christmas cactus, if you're buying them in bloom, a couple of things you need to do. First of all, you cannot twist them. In other words, you know how people sometimes say, oh, I'm going to turn my plant because I get the sun from one side and not the other. Can't do that with a Christmas cactus, a Thanksgiving cactus, an Easter cactus, or any of the other types like this. What happens is the flowers turn to the light and they quite literally snap off and drop. So once they're sat in their location, they stay that way. They need long nights, short days, with no interruptions. And this is what triggers the Christmas cactus into bloom and can trigger it into bloom many times in 1 year if you give those conditions. They do like it cooler. They do like it slightly drier in the fall. And both of those, with the long nights and short days, will mean that they will bud up and you'll get lots and lots of flowers. If you don't give those conditions, then what happens is they either grow and don't flower, or you'll get a few flowers here or there and they'll be sparse. Temperatures 60 to 70 degrees during the day and down around 55 to 60 at night if possible. So be aware and try and do those things with Christmas cactus. If you're going to buy a poinsettia, now when you buy a poinsettia, what most people don't realize is that the flowers are actually only those little nubs in the middle. And those little nubs will indicate the ripeness or how far along the plant is in its development. You want those buds in the center of the bract, what they call the flower, to be really small and tight. If they're expanded, yellow, and show a little bit of red in the flower, and this is in the center, then you know that the plant is well developed, and of course it's going to shortly drop all those flowers out and leave a bare center. So it means that the poinsettia has been around a little while as well and may not be the freshest. So the other thing you need to look for is yellowing leaves or green leaves that have dried and curled. Either are an indication of incorrect watering, one being too wet, the other being too dry. And so you want to make sure you don't buy those plants because you'll get a bare stemmed poinsettia and you'll just have to put a bigger piece of foil on it. And this is what the florists do. Or they put it in a deeper pot or into a center of arrangement and do an arrangement around it. In any case, this is what you don't buy when you're like that. So the center, the buds will be small. Well-colored bracts, those are the leaves that have colors. And it can be any color that are available from oranges, yellows, pinks, pink and whites, red and whites, reds, whites. You name it, there's more and more breeding being done. But they all require some light, and I do mean bright light, so that you don't get that dusty look on the bracts. And it's not dust, it's lack of light. So bright light will prevent that, and of course the color of the bracts will be maintained. Correct watering, neither wet nor dry nor standing water, surface drying between waterings, and house temperatures. House temperatures will easily be fine with this one. Keep them away from heat sources such as televisions, heat vents. Anything where heat is exhausted will be a bad place for your poinsettias. In fact, bad place for any of the plants we've talked about. Temperature-wise, you're looking at 65 to 70 degrees during the day and about 65 at night. So they do like it a little warmer. So that would be good. If you're going to, by the way, grow the crown of thorns, which will be in bloom at this time of year, this is not the actual plant that Christ's crown was made of, but it is what it's called, and it is called crown of thorns. So people do grow it for that reason. They're bracts, so the flowers will actually be on stems, and they will bloom and do well. They can be trimmed, which people don't often do, and sometimes this plant gets a little leggy over time, and that's a problem. So, moist, remember you're growing a cactus, but it's got leafy leaves, so it's more towards a succulent. So, not wet, not dry, a little bit of surface drying between waterings, no standing water. If they get too dry, what happens is they do drop their leaves, particularly their older leaves, yellow. Same thing will happen if they get too wet. Bright light, you're growing a succulent, so right in the window. And if you'd like to be adventurous, there are yellow ones, flowered ones, as well as white, as well as pink, as well as red. So you can try those. Temperatures 65 to 75 during the day and 60 to 70 at night. Now there is a Jerusalem cherry that's available usually from this time on. Jerusalem cherries look like a little miniature orange tree. You'll have fruit, flowers, and ripe fruit as well as immature fruit on the plant at the same time. It is a member of the Solanum family, which, of course, there's a lot of poisonous ones, including this one. So this one is not a plant I would put into a home where there will be children who put things in their mouths. These are poisonous plants. So Jerusalem cherry will give you oranges that look orange, but they're of course smooth. And they'll have green fruit, and they will also have the white star type Solanum flower as well. All at the same time. If you're going to grow this one, you can get some nice flowering out of it. It needs a good bright location. The soil needs to be a little on the dry side, but then watered well or heavily between waterings. Don't overwater this one. Don't keep it wet. You'll lose a lot of your older foliage on this plant as well. And we do, of course, need bright light. Now, if you're getting an ornamental pepper at this time of year, most oriental peppers, the peppers are edible, but extremely hot. So it's not something I would probably risk or even try. But again, with the ornamental peppers, you're getting a plant that it needs very bright light and moist, with surface drying between, no standing waters. Decent humidity on this plant, away from heat sources, but good bright light. And at the same time, don't feed it, because the fruit are already there, the flowers are there, and they will continue to bloom. Now, maybe later on, getting closer to spring, you may want to feed them, get some growth going, and get them hardened off, and they could go out in the garden for the summer. And, of course, you could bring them back in again later on. So, up to you how you handle that one as well. Cyclamen is another one that is given. Now, I like this plant because this plant usually makes a great gift if you're going to give it to a hostess when you go to visit at Christmas time, because most people don't have it, and yet it's very colorful, it's easy to look after. It is a corm, and being a corm, it is slightly susceptible to over or incorrect watering. The roots on it are like hair, and so they're easy to rot off. So watering is the key. No water on the corm or in the crown of the corm. That's why very often they are planted with the corm high, and they may be topped up in the pot later on with soil just to make them look good. If you start getting wilt, it can be from being excessively watered as well as dry. So it's a consistency in watering here. Cool. They have bred the newer varieties of cyclamen to handle 60, 65 degree temperature. So it's a bright, light plant that likes it a little on the cool side. And, of course, will bloom and bloom and bloom and seldom needs to be repotted. So it can be a great plant to give. And it can go outside under trees for the summer if you're there all the time to check it for watering as well. But it does have to be hardened off going out and going in. Those are some of the great plants that you're going to be able to do. I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.